Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. So today I want to talk about some of these news stories we've got over the past week or so about things that have happened with the Overwatch League, between the Overwatch League and teams, and kind of a lack of communication that has been kind of at the center of a bit of drama over the past week. I wasn't going to talk about it originally when only the first story I'm going to talk about today had dropped, but now that we've got a lot more kind of stories that have been released and things that have come out, I think it is imperative now that we spend some time talking about what's going on, really, and kind of get to the heart of things and just kind of talk about it. I will warn you now, this is a very article-heavy, text-heavy, context-heavy video. And so I will absolutely recommend all of you go to the link in the description and check the articles that are linked down there. They are from GG Recon, from Fiasco. They are phenomenal articles that give you all the context you need. I recommend following along because it is hard to get all of this context out and talking about both of these stories without spending an hour talking about what's going on. So we're going to start with this first story, which is about the Hangzhou Spark. The article here from Fiasco titled Overwatch League Team Calls Out League Over Violating Its Own Rules. Now, this came about from essentially a preseason ruling that had been released about how qualification work into the mid-season Madness tournament. I will throw that up on the screen so you can kind of see it and follow along with what I'm saying. But as you can see here, the seeding is, as listed here, is as followed. Seed 1 will be awarded to the Western Region team with the best win-loss records in the Western Region, measured as of the conclusion of the West Spring Stage qualifiers. That, of course, is the Atlanta Reign, who finished with a perfect 8-0 record, so they are the number 1 seed. Seed 2 will be awarded to the winning East Region team / contenders team of Bracket 1 of the East Spring Season Knockouts. In the context of the results that we ended up getting, that would be the Hangzhou Spark. Then they say here that Seed 3 will be awarded to the Western Region team with the second best win-to-loss records in the Western Region, measured as of the conclusion of the West Spring Stage qualifiers, Houston Outlaws. Seed 4 will be awarded to the winning Eastern Region team / contenders team of Bracket 2 of the Eastern Spring Season Knockouts. In this case, as written, that would be the Soul Infernal. And then Seed 5, the Western Region team who qualified through the upper bracket of the West Spring Stage, Boston Uprising, and Seed 6 qualified through the lower bracket, which would be the Florida Mayhem. So as written, the seeding should have been Atlanta Reign, Hangzhou Spark, Houston Outlaws, Soul Infernal, Boston Uprising, Florida Mayhem. But the seeding as it was announced was Atlanta Reign, Soul Infernal, Houston Outlaws, Hangzhou Spark, and then the Boston Uprising and the Florida Mayhem. And so Gray, the head of the Hangzhou Spark, comes out and says, hey, the rules that we were given said that we would be the number 2 seed for winning the A bracket, and we are not. We are the 4 seed. They went against the rules that they had put out. They said one thing, and they did another thing, and we want clarity on this. We want to kind of just talk about the fact that the league basically said they were going to do something and then didn't, and we are the team who lost out because of it. We basically got screwed over, and now we're in the lower bracket. We're not in, we don't have the bye right off the bat. And so Sean Miller came out with a tweet. I'll throw it up on the screen so you can kind of see it. But he said here, as we head into an exciting midseason Madness in Seoul next week, the league wants to acknowledge an administration error when seeding rules are communicated and distributed to teams. Our intent has always been to have the team with the best performance throughout Spring Stage to be the first seed, which would obviously be the Atlanta Reign in this case, but he's also saying out of the Eastern region. And we worked closely with impacted teams, both the Soul Infernal and Hangzhou Spark, and apologize for the confusion this has brought. We have increased the prize pool and taken steps to ensure these clerical errors don't happen again, and we can't wait to witness the tournament next weekend. So, this to me, this reply, this whole situation is really just kind of absurd. And it's a thing that to me falls in this weird balance where I think the reality is the rule as written that the Seed 2 would go to the team that wins Bracket 1 and the Seed 4 goes to the team that wins Bracket 2 is one of the worst rules I've ever heard in my life. Like, that rule is terribly written because, in my opinion, they even say the winning East region team / contenders team of bracket 1. I am sorry, I know people will be annoyed by this. There is no universe in which a contenders team should end up with a higher seed potentially than an Overwatch League team, right? Unless it is an even and equivalent thing, right? If they did a single elimination bracket with the Eastern region, which they should have, by the way, they should have never done the double bracket system. It's a terrible decision, and all it did was create confusion. But if they had done a single elimination bracket, or not single elimination bracket, a single bracket, where they put all of the teams into one bracket, and the team that wins the upper bracket moves on, and the team that wins the lower bracket moves on. If a team from contenders had won the upper bracket, then yes, they should be the top seed coming out of the Eastern region. But in the system as it was in place, the team with the best record that moves on should be the team that wins, especially because the brackets are not even, they're not equal. The argument can be made that bracket 2 was significantly harder than the first bracket. You know, Soul Inferno had to get past O2 Blast, Dallas Fuel. I mean, Shanghai was the weakest team in that bracket for sure, but that side of the bracket, like, they had theirs was way more difficult, I think. Though arguably the Spark side of the bracket was also pretty difficult. I take that back. Spark side of the bracket was way more difficult because you had the Charge and Spark, both of them were very, very good. You had the Soul Dynasty, who were better than the Dragons. You had Poker Face and Dreamers, who both looked very good. So you could argue that bracket 1 was the tougher bracket, and so that by that logic, that team should have been the one that advanced. But I think at the end of the day, they shouldn't have had 2 brackets, and that was the problem. So I think the fact that the Soul Inferno are the higher seed is the thing that should be the case. The team that finishes with the better record in the knockouts, or in the spring stage qualifiers, should be the one with the higher seeding, because that is the way that it works in the West, right? In the Western region, the team that finishes with the best record is the team that ends up as the number 1 seed. And so why wouldn't that then apply in the East as well? The team with the higher record, the better performance, should be the team that ends up in the better position based on the way the rules and the way the tournament works. But I also think the fact that the league did this, had this really terrible rule, went through, and then backtracked on it after publishing it to the teams is just that's not an administrative failure. That is an administrative embarrassment. And it's, to me, this is one of those things that screams just the league having the league does not publish its rules publicly. They did in the past. You used to be able to find all of the rules on the Overwatch League website. You can't find them anymore. They're gone now. They just simply don't exist anymore. Why? I don't know. And it's always been confusing. It was confusing last year with the playoffs, where the seeding didn't make sense because your regular season record mattered, but also your playoff record mattered. So the amount of games you won in tournaments also mattered more. And it was all ridiculous. It was a terrible thing that made no sense in the context of the playoffs. And it was one of those things that I was super critical of, and the rules were never made public, so it was impossible to follow along. And it was one of the things that I was furious about last year, and they still don't publish their rules. This is the kind of thing that should be looked at. This is the kind of thing that should never happen if you are active and you are actually attentive to your rules and you make sure stuff like this doesn't happen. Because when you publish rules publicly, there is way less confusion about things that are going on. And if you publish things publicly and the rules that are public contradict the rules that are private behind the scenes, you can have a conversation of like, hey, you told us one thing and you have a different thing on the website. What's the deal? Is there something we should know? Is this a conversation we need to have? Should we figure out what's happening before the tournament happens? Right? And so that's one of the reasons why the fact that they don't publish the rules publicly is just absurd. And I think that they need to get that sorted out. Like, they need to publish the rules. Because confusing rules and backtracking and weird decisions have been a thing that have plagued the league now for the past couple of years, and they need to change that. They need to get better at that because it's just a problem. The second story, which is related to this kind of rule confusion, comes about from this news that broke because Vega, who is a player who plays in the Western region, he's an NA Contenders player, he just turned 17. And Vega was under the impression that by turning 17, he was now eligible to compete in the Overwatch League. Because, of course, in years past, when you turned 18, in the middle of the season, you could, as long as it was before a certain date, you could join the Overwatch League. And there was a lot of confusion behind the scenes where things were not necessarily super clear. This is a thing that I know what the rule is, because the rule was published publicly and it was put out when they made the announcement that you had to be 17 back a few months ago. And it says right here on the Overwatch League website, the article is roster construction rules for the 2023 Overwatch League season. I will link to it in the description. I will put a screenshot of it up on the screen. But you can see here, it says very clearly, players who will be 17 years old or older as of the date of the first match of the 2023 league season are eligible to sign PSAs for and compete in the 2023 season. This was something that I brought up back when the news broke about being like, hey, I think the rule needs to be in place that you can't turn 17 and join the league, because I think when you have 18-year-olds, it's different. You're legally an adult in pretty much every place in the world. But if you're 17, a player who is 16 and just turned 17 during the season probably shouldn't be allowed to sign a contract, because there's a lot more liability and whatnot involved in that. And so I kind of agreed with that. But there was once again confusion behind the scenes, because different rules were published kind of around different times. Also, another thing that makes that rule very unclear is that it says the first match of the 2023 season, but does that mean the Pro-Am? Does that mean the regular season? There was a version that said each player must be at least 17 years old on or before March 23rd, 2023, which was when the Pro-Am started. But the public one doesn't specify that. So once again, there is confusion behind the rules, and there's not a lot of clarity about it. And there were kind of back and forth answers. And it became even more confusing when Sean Miller came out and internally shared a message where he said, you just have to be 17 as of the date of your first OWL match. So that would be essentially the way the rule was in the past, where you turned 18 and you were eligible to play. He came out and said, no, you have to be, if you turn 17, you can join a team. And so once again, there was contradictory things now. We have now 3 different things. You have to be 17 by March 23rd. You have to be 17 by the date of the first match of the 2023 league season, which presumably would have been the regular season. And you just have to be 17 before you can sign a contract, right? Once you turn 17, you can sign a contract, even if the season has begun. And so the league, tons of confusion, tons of people kind of had questions and they didn't really know, whatever. There was a final kind of thing where they came out and said the league will be proceeding as originally planned and require that a player must have been 17 at the time of season start. So if you're 17 now, if you're someone like Vega who just turned 17, you cannot sign a contract. And they doubled down through a message and a statement to GG Recon, where they said the league continues to proceed with its player age eligibility requirements, which state that a player must have been 17 years old at the start of the season. So the confusion here is just the league is doing a terrible job with communicating rules, right? And I think it's one of those things that, to me, it is frustrating. It is one of those things that you look at it and you just get... It's just one of those things that I see it and I roll my eyes, because this is a problem that keeps happening. And I don't want to say that it's a Sean Miller problem, but to me, these problems were not as prevalent when we had John Spector or any of the other commissioners we've had in the past. And it's one of those things that for me is just very frustrating, because the rules are just so confusing and things are so poor behind the scenes. There's so little communication. It seems like they don't have anybody who's actually looking over the rules. It seems like the people in charge don't know the actual rules for the league. And there was a tweet that I think was beautiful. It was a beautifully put tweet from Yiska. And he said, if all rules were public in the preseason before they had to be locked in, I promise there would be a special agent group of hyper-rule addicted turbo nerds wielding their litigious spirit to find fault lines at plank length scale in your rule set, free of charge. And let's be honest, I am one of those hyper-rule addicted turbo nerds wielding litigious spirit. I want to find those fault lines. I want to look at the rules. I want to see them. I want to understand the rules. Because when I am sitting here and I'm trying to make a video and I'm trying to make content and I genuinely don't know the rules because everything I see about them is different wherever you look, it is very annoying. And when I try to do standings and the standings that I have are different than the standings on the Overwatch League website because they never announced publicly that your record in matches in the playoffs or in tournaments apply to what your record is going into the postseason, it just doesn't make sense. If you're not going to include those wins and losses in the overall season record, then what's the point, you know? And so to me, I look at stuff like this and it's just so frustrating to watch the league do this. And I think the league, if someone from the league happens to be watching this video, I don't think it's going to happen, but if somebody from the league happens to be watching this video, and this is the only video of mine they ever watch, please just listen to what I have to say, which is there needs to be a much more dedicated team within the league ops to ensuring that rules are not only publicly available, because rules should be publicly available. In most sports leagues, as far as I know, you can find the rules publicly. They are made available. You can look at them, you can view them, and it's one of those things where not everyone's going to look at them, but you need them out there for clarity for the people who do care and who want to understand why things are the way they are. Make the rules public. Have someone internally, a team of people internally, whose entire job in the preseason and during the season is to ensure that rules are clear, are followed, and to ensure that when there are questions about rules, that they are the people who answer those questions and who provide the answers to those questions if they don't answer them directly. When teams have questions about rules, they need to be the people who are delivering them. Because when you have someone making announcements, someone who is the face of the league coming out and saying something that is directly contradictory to publicly published rules, it is a really bad look, and it causes nothing but confusion and frustration for fans, for players, for the organizations, where there is going to be a loss of trust in the league leadership if the rules and things similar to the rules and these publicly made announcements are contradictory to things that are happening behind the scenes. Clarity is very important, and if there is one thing that the league has not been good at recently, it is clear rules and operations and stuff like that. They don't come out and explain certain things, and to some degree that's fine, right? They're never going to come out here and tell you that the reason why there's only 6 teams in the Mid-Season Madness is because they don't want to have to pay for 2 additional teams to fly to Korea because it's expensive, and I understand that, right? They want to try to cut back on costs a bit by not flying too many teams out to Korea. That's fine. I don't have an issue with that, right? I understand why it's 6 teams. That's why it's 6 teams. That's totally fine, right? Why are they only hosting 2 tournaments? Because it's really expensive to host LAN events. They're not going to tell you that that's why they are not doing it, but that's why they're not doing it. But it's stuff like this. It is competitive rulings that really are frustrating when they're not followed correctly. And so I think the league needs to be better about putting this information out there and saying, here are our rules, put them out before the season starts so that people can look at them. Because the thing is, you can make changes. It is better to make a change before something happens than to backtrack and have to go, oh wait, that's not what we meant, and that's what the league has been doing, right? It's much better to put a rule out there and have it be something that you then change through conversations with the teams and through like fan feedback than it is to put out the rules internally and then just not follow them, and then you are not held accountable appropriately. I'm glad that the tournament bracket now for the Midseason Madness is the way it should be, and that the Infernal should be the higher seed. I'm glad that there's more prize money now. But the fact that this had to happen, and the fact that it was the league messing up and having an error that caused this whole thing to come out publicly, is a problem. It's a bad look for the league. And if you're a league that is dealing with teams that are not happy, they're the money situation, right? We got the news last week that the Defiant came out and we're like, hey, we don't have to pay our fees anymore, which is really, really good, right? It's the first bit of positive news we've gotten in the league. And then immediately, the next thing we get is, oh, and by the way, we also have terrible rule clarity, and now we have another bit of drama on our hands. And so I just think the league needs to clean this up. They need to get better at it. They need people internally who are better at it, and you just got to release the rules publicly. Put the rules out publicly, and 95% of these problems will get erased immediately because people will read through them and find these problems and go, hey, is this really what you want? Or do you want something else? Because saying one thing and having another thing be written down just does not look good, and it doesn't show that that was your intention. And so that's really where I kind of fall in the situation. That's it for this video. There's a lot to talk about here. Like I said, read the 2 Yiska articles in the description because they are phenomenal and they provide way more context than I can. But let me know your thoughts on this story in the comments down below. What is your thought on the rules? Do you agree with the rulings that they made? Do you agree with the changes? Do you think they should have followed the rule as written? Do you think that they made the right decision by putting the Soul Infernal as the higher seed? Do you agree with the way that the 17 rule has been enforced? Are you glad they followed a rule as written? Do you think that it's bad? Whatever it is, there's a lot of stuff here. I know this is a bit of a long video and kind of confusing and rambly, but I just wanted to kind of rant a bit and get my thoughts on this because it is frustrating as a fan, someone who loves the league so much and makes content about the league. This is the type of stuff that just really does make me so furious and annoyed, and it's the type of stuff that I want to see them clean up, and they just have not done a good job recently. So that's it for this video. If you enjoyed this video and want more like it in the future, consider liking and subscribing, as your support does help out a bunch with the channel. But that's going to be all from me for today. Hope you're all staying safe and staying healthy. And until next time, bye-bye.